Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ask an Angel with Jonathan Hung. I'm with William Schumacher of Uprising Foods. Hey, William, thank you for taking the time.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to learn more about how Uprising is going, talk about the experience, as a founder. So let's get into it. When did you start Uprising?
Yeah, so we started Uprising back in 2019. So we're just over 2.5 years old.
Wonderful. And so, what is the burning problem you're trying to solve? What made you come up with the idea of Uprising?
Yeah, so the big idea behind Uprising is that the food system is fundamentally broken, especially in the major staple categories. And so our belief at Uprising is we need a food revolution. That's why we call it Uprising. And it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's actually very much true. We as a society, especially here in America, are sick at scale despite being the most prosperous country in the world, right? And so the question is, why are we that way? Why are we spending trillions of dollars in the healthcare industry treating diseases of lifestyle? And so our point of view at Uprising is that it's the major staple categories, the breads, the chips, the pastas, the pizzas, etc., that were scaled out in the mid-1900s on ingredient profiles that do things in the body that we didn't necessarily know, and now we've got an issue, and they need to be reinvented so that people can recapture their health. And so that's where we step in as a brand to solve this problem and say, hey, we are going to make the best of the best staples, the healthiest things you can get your hands on, but we're not going to compromise on taste, and we're going to scale them out and make them accessible to the masses. So that's what we're going after.
Wonderful. And yeah, so I love to hear about, your team. It's always so important. And me as an angel investor, I think about that's the most important. That's what really drove me to loving your company, is how great of a CEO you are. But yeah, how did you build your team, especially your leadership team, where we were starting, how it's going?
Yeah, so our team is first off a set of 4 co-founders, okay? And each of us are bringing a very specific expertise to the table. So my wife and I are the brand building side of the equation. We were started here in Cincinnati. We both work for CPG companies. I work for Procter and Gamble in brand before I started this. So we have the CPG understanding and the understanding of how you scale billion-dollar brands. However, we are a food company, right? And so when we went to start the company, we said, hey, we know consumers will not compromise on taste, and nobody will stick to anything in health if it doesn't taste fantastic. So how can we get co-founders who understand the product side at the level we understand brand building? And so we teamed up with the greatest artisan bakers in our region to formulate a product that was no compromise on taste, artisan grade, and we brought our brand building and said, hey, we know how to scale this and we know how to market this. We team up together. This is going to be 1 + 1 = 3. So that was our starting point, was like excellent on product, excellent on brand building and go to market. Let's start there. Then we said, okay, we then want to surround ourselves with fantastic agencies and fantastic partners who add components of our go-to-market plan, who are experts in one area or another. And that's how we've went about building our team and our kind of team of teams. And we really focus on our partners being part of the team. So even though we are extremely small from an actual FTE's perspective, we actually get a lot of help out of like our co-packer. They do a lot of work that is not necessarily normal because they actually feel like a part of the team. So we're strategic in that way, and that allows us to scale and really complete more work than what a normal small team would be able to do.
Oh, that's great. And full disclosure, I think like my business partner found you on an Instagram ad, right? And saw like, wow, the quality.
Yes.
And like, talk about that to people, out there trying to build their brand, right? I mean, obviously you're doing direct to consumer. We're in this digital age now with Gen Zs and millennials. Like, how has that journey been for you, growing your brand differently from working at Procter and Gamble?
Yeah, so obviously a massive CPG company like Procter and Gamble is shelf first. Okay, so at Procter & Gamble, you're thinking like, what does Walmart and what does Target need in order to grow their business first and foremost? here at Uprising, we think about the direct-to-consumer channel first, because there is so much value in doing that first. Not doing that only, but doing that first, because the relationship and the insights that you build and gather by having the direct-to-consumer channel scaled out and available for all customers is tremendous. You can barely put a dollar value on that. The ability to text 10,000 consumers and get feedback, or drive them to a next action that you need, whether that's, hey, voting for you in a contest, or whether that's, hey, we're launching at a retailer today and we need people to show up. That ability to talk direct to the consumer is hugely beneficial as you scale, and it's easier to have done that first than to go back and try to do that after you're already scaled out and you're already in a ton of retailers. And so we love the ability to be direct to consumer first, and it also gets us in front of a lot of people. And it allows us to be we call ourselves a modern farm market at digital scale. So rather than going to one farm market like in LA, which is fantastic, especially if you're starting a food brand in LA, because a lot of influential people show up to the LA's farm market, we are able to get in front of everybody all the time. Any consumer in the US, we're allowed to take our farm market, which is our uprisingfood.com site, and put it in front of you, and we meet influential people because they see the product, they love the product, they want to buy the product as a consumer first and foremost, and then they reach out. And that's how we all got connected.
That's great, yeah. So then what would you say, not necessarily what your competitors are doing wrong, but like, what are they missing that you're capturing on, that you're, slowly chipping away and getting market share in?
Yeah, so one thing that we've been saying a lot lately is what we are trying to do is usher in food 3.0. So, in tech, it's like Web 2.0 and all this stuff. We say we're trying to usher in the age of food 3.0. So what the heck is that? Well, food 1.0 was the days of Cheerios. Like, hey, let's scale out food so that we can feed everybody, okay? But it was like, feed everybody first, and that we didn't know nearly as much about health. Then what we say, food 2.0 was, hey, we're starting to learn about health. We're seeing different trends, as a market, and people are starting to go after one trend or another. Like Annie's builds a fantastic business off of the understanding that organic is super important. And then you have other trends that come along, paleo movement, keto movement, etc. Okay, so then the question is, what's food 3.0? Well, to us, food 3.0 would be putting all that together. What are the key health trends that are massively important for overall health, high leverage in people's bodies, and how do we do that in products that can scale to the levels of like a Cheerio? And so that's where we see what's so different about us versus everybody else is we are definitely designed and building for the masses, but at the same time, we are taking the pinnacle health attributes and key benefit spaces and combining them into products that are way more than just a bread and way more than just chips. And that separates us from the pack.
Great, wonderful. And now, I love you talk about your vision and what you're working on. Now we got to talk about the dark side of being an entrepreneur and funding, it's always a concern, and I'm sure everyone out there wants to know, like, well, how did you do it? How did you get your first check, or how have you found your investors from the start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I faced the same issue that a lot of founders face coming out of corporate America. I was working at P&G, and then I wanted to leave to start Uprising. And so I had to first overcome first-time founder. Like, okay, you've only worked at big corporate, do you really have what it takes? Do you really have the mettle to be an entrepreneur? You had tens of millions of dollars to market. What can you do with 250,000? That, those type of questions that I had to face in the early days. And definitely there were a lot of people like, nah, I don't think, I don't know that you can do this. And so ultimately how I achieved my early funding was by finding people who knew me from my corporate life, who could vouch for my capabilities, expertise, and skills, and who believed in what we were trying to do at a fundamental level. And then those folks became incredible advocates to bring in other investors who didn't necessarily know me personally, but who, because somebody could vouch for me coming out, making that transition into foundership and entrepreneurship, that was able to give them the confidence that it was safe to invest in, and I was a good bet. And so, that has been key is, in the early days, that very early funding, being able to, connect those dots for folks. Now, after that, it's still early days. What I have focused on is people who bring strategic value and where there's a win-win, a mutually beneficial partnership. And so I'm very, very choosy. And I expect other people on their side to be very, very choosy. And we look for, okay, this is truly a win-win and there's value on both sides. And, those relationships, if you're focused on that, you can tend to find like, where is there a fantastic fit? And then, they're out there. And so that's what I focus on, is finding fit and then going from there.
Got it. Wonderful. And so who's your ideal investor? I'm sure you've worked with like angel investors versus high net worth individuals to potentially corporates or, venture funds, like someone who's hands-on, hands-off. Like, who do you think is great for you for helping Uprising get to the next level?
Yeah. So ideal investor is first requirement is a fanatic about the problem. Okay. If you're not a fanatic about the problem of a broken food system and products that need flipped on their head, and you don't understand necessarily the health component, we're not going to be a good fit. And that's okay. But that's number one requirement for me. And then number two requirement is, what's the second level value that the investor is bringing to the table? And I look at it as, is there a specific industry expertise that they're bringing? Is it some sort of influence over distribution to the consumer, or is there any influence over the actual consumer and what they consider pick and buy? Because those are the things that are of significant and incremental value to me. There's a lot of cash out there, and cash is a commodity by nature, but cash where there is incremental value is what I see as win-wins. And as a brand that is, distributing, and looking to distribute at scale, we're looking for, how do we impact the consumer? How do we impact distribution? How do we impact long-term strategy? And if I find an investor who can bring those things to the table, then there's a high likelihood of fit. And then the last thing that I look for is, what do I think their level of patience is? What do I think they think about timelines? I want people who understand that, hey, when you're trying to build $1 billion brand, the timeline to get there, that's not going to be done overnight. And so do we have the patience, the appetite for that type of timeline, which is, not everybody has that. And, certain types of investors, they need certain timelines and certain returns. And that's okay. But those are the three things that I think matter the most to me for an investor.
Wonderful. Thank you, William. Yeah. And so I'd love to digress on like supply chain. I have a supply chain. I'd love to hear your experience now, what's going on in the world now, and like, how is your manufacturing or how your supply chain or delivery has been going on? Is it for better or worse? Good, best? I mean, I deal with that with all my startups. I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah. So I think that on the spectrum of supply chain woes, which pretty much everybody's facing at this point, I would consider Uprising definitely on the better side of that spectrum. and really for us, our supply chain is all about raw ingredients. Yep. Okay. And we plan way in advance, and our raw ingredients are sourceable without being impacted by a lot of the key supply chain delays right now. And so we're able to plan in advance, get raw ingredients. The biggest issue in our supply chain is the labor component and having a supply of labor to make our product. And the inflationary pressures that we see now as, the wages for the type of people that work on our product, the wages at the bottom end of the market starting to really increase rapidly. And so we've seen increased labor costs, we've seen increased packaging costs. And these things really do start to tally up. And so we're definitely fortunate because we can procure everything that we need. We're definitely not out of stock, and we plan way in advance. But we're now looking at, okay, our costs, rather than going down year over year as we expected, are either holding, and in some things they're increasing a bit. And so, we're now thinking through, okay, what are other ways we can become more efficient from a cost structure perspective when some of the key variables are canceling out what would have been cost savings by inflationary pressures.
Got it. No, thank you. And so I'm sure people would love to hear your advice, Phil. Like, what would you tell a young founder trying to bring their vision to life right now? Like, what's some tidbits that you would tell, when you're job, anything to watch out for, or maxims or advice you'd give them?
Yeah. So my biggest learning in this journey is, and if I were to tell if I would be able to talk to myself 2.5 years ago, I would have said, have a relentless focus on simplification. Okay. So I tend to, in my head, architect like very complex perfection. Right. That's my nature in my mind, is, very deep details, architecting all sorts of things like very perfectly in a very detailed level. But what I found over time is that simplifying, focus on doing one thing at a time extremely well happens to outperform that over time. And so I would tell a young founder, what's your one thing that you are going to hammer on and relentlessly simplify your company? And then you can always add things in later and then simplify again.
Great. Wonderful. And, fortunately for us, our guest here, William has been on Shark Tank, and I'd love to hear about your experience, what you thought about it. Was it good? Would you do it again, going in hindsight, or, is it something that makes sense for everyone?
Yeah, so 100% I would do it again. There's absolutely no way, you can pass up that amount of eyeballs. 3.5 to 5 million eyeballs, depending on the episode. The media value, the PR value, the credential value of that alone makes it 100% worth it. It's not a guaranteed thing, so you can't bet your company on it. You have to really think of it as awareness first and foremost. And that's what we did. We wanted to get the message out there, get it out to a mass audience. And it has already opened significant doors for us, even though we didn't get a deal. And so you can't lose unless you bank the whole company on it. And so that's why I tell folks, hey, if you get a shot to go on Shark Tank, go, but don't let it distract your company such that you're totally focused on Shark Tank. Like, we treated it as an initiative that we had to put resources behind, but not as hey, this is going to take us to the next level.
Got it. Wonderful. And lastly, William, I'd love to hear your insight about, every founder out there, entrepreneur, obviously it takes a team, as we said earlier, but what do you rely on? Is there any books or publications, podcasts, or other entrepreneurs you follow or read or try to get inspiration from, or help tell your team about, to look into, what gets you, your data that you need? What drives you?
Yeah, so we are first and foremost driven by customers, which is might not be a surprise to folks if they know anything about consumer products and my background at P&G. You quickly learn that building brands is all about being consumer driven. So we are crazy about talking to our customers, reading all the reviews, essentially extracting the insights of why is what we're doing working or not working, what do the consumers say, and then just tackling them over and over and just like literally relentlessly going through that loop. And so there's definitely like external inspiration. For me personally, like I love to listen to podcasts by Seth Godin from a marketing side. I love to listen to Reid Hoffman from a Masters of Scale, tech side. And I like to blend kind of modern thinking plus old school things that have been proven and, use those as inspiration to come into the company. But when it comes to like really making changes day in, day out, it's really about what does the consumer want and can we fulfill their needs? And so we are outwardly aware, but we are inwardly focused on that consumer.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, William. And I guess one more question I do have, I'm just out of curiosity, like, what do you think about when is the right time to go omni-channel, and go from like your direct consumer, but then you go into traditional retail as a brand? Is there a certain, like, is it you look at the marketing money that you have to spend, or is it certain KPIs you focus on where you think, oh, okay, now it's time for to bring Uprising here versus there? Like, because you only have so much money, like you said in the beginning, unless you're P&G where you can like throw mass amounts of money.
Right.
You have to be dedicated and truly laser focused. Like you said, simplification, as you said earlier.
Yeah. So when is a fantastic question. There's not one right answer, in my opinion, for everybody. Here's how I've thought about this. When for Uprising was, when do we think we can knock it out of the park in omni-channel? So then you go, well, what does it take to knock it out of the park? And why do I think we've got to be at that level? Well, because when you go omni-channel, when you start selling to retailers, your margin of error is so much less. If you mess up on an e-commerce order, consumers are extraordinarily forgiving. And if we screwed up on a $50 shipment, we can ship you $50 and it's not ending the company, right? We can reship that. However, if you misship a Costco order or you misship a Walmart order, if you got to bring that back because you had a product quality issue or something, you might be out of business.
Absolutely.
Okay, so expanding to Omni is, first off, is my supply chain of the height of a level of quality that when I tell Walmart I can do this, not only do I know I can do it, but I can over deliver. Okay. So that's one. Where's my supply chain at? Two is, do I have the data to have a strong sell story when I go in front of them and say, here's the consumer who buys this. Here's the repurchase rates. They're in this geography. Is my e-commerce data around a product strong enough to get a retailer excited? And am I confident that people are going to rebuy? Because you can make a sale, but if people don't rebuy, then your velocity is not going to be there and you're going to be delisted. So we want to be so abundantly confident that when we go omni, we're going to crush. And so we're slow to make those moves until we feel, oh yeah, we've got it. And we know we can deliver with the highest quality of excellence.
No, I love that. I always tell people, like, I'm known for under promising and over delivering, right? Because the people who tell you to, like, oh, let's give you the moon, I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yes. And at the end of the day, a brand is just a promise and a product, right? And so to me, being a great brand is about being great at your promise and over delivering with your product. And that will create a superior value equation. And if you have a superior value equation, people are going to love you and they're going to buy and rebuy and tell their friends. So
great. Thank you. So love to answer any questions you may have for me, or I could be helpful. Yeah.
So my biggest question is, how do you think about success criteria related to speed of growth for your investments?
You know, it's so dependent on the type of industry you're in, right? Because like, I've luckily had companies where we were bought and there was no revenue. There literally was no revenue. It was just they bought the team and the technology in place. And it was just like, wow, and like I look like a hero, but like, I believed in the team really well. And then there are times where it's just like when we look at a consumer product, we have to hit certain goals. We have to, like, you're doing tremendous. We were just talking about this earlier, like how you're growing revenue.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It's like, I have a partner who tells me, like, when you look at CPG, you got to go like three times, like year 1, year 2, year 3, your revenue, and then double, right? And like, it's a good model, but like, it's not the end all be all because like, things happen, like certain things in 2020, like we're resetting. But the idea is that it is growth. It is about growth when it comes to CPG, and we look at, wow, it's what can we change differently? Is it about the supply chain where we can reduce COGS, and then, okay, now we can have extra money for revenue? I mean, in terms of marketing, that we can grow the revenue. And it's so important from that aspect. And like, look, there are key numbers to hit, right? Everyone says like, oh, you got to get to like, if you're a pre-seed company, like, okay, well, show me how you can get to 100K MRR. Right. And then like, okay, that because they were showing me you're going to get to, 1.2 million. And then from 1.2 million, how are you going to grow to like, 10 million, going forward? Those are good metrics, but it's not set in stone. Really. It's like, look, it could be an opportunity that you were on Shark Tank. And now it's like, wow, a certain buyer sees you. They're like, wow, let me try you out. And people don't understand, like, it really is getting the right person to see your brand at the right stage and point in time, and then you grow gangbusters. Yes. That's really what it is. Totally. Like you said, one order, when you're ready to go omnichannel, can change the whole company, but also could bankrupt the whole company. I've worked at Costco, and it's like, listen, it's like, it's a great order to have, but if you're like getting 5% returns, they're going to be like, what's going on? And like, they're going to like send the whole thing back. Like as a contract manufacturer, I've heard stories where like Forever 21 will cancel an order because one button's missing, and they're like, oh geez, because like it's daunting, and it's the things you have to look at to see like, well, how can we grow to scale? And like, especially for you, reorder. Because it's not like you're something where it's like, oh, it's like buying a huge tractor and it's a one-time purchase and we depreciate over like 5-10 years. No, we can buy you every other week.
Yes. Yeah, that's the magical thing about high frequency CPG is, if you get a customer and they repeat, what they're worth is tremendous.
Exactly. And then the funny thing is sometimes like it just depends where you're in the life cycle. Like certain beverage companies will get bought early because, wow, like we don't have a seltzer program. So we got to get it now. Or we do build or do we acquire? It's like, oh, that's probably too much. Let's just acquire somebody. But then sometimes like you'll see Coca-Cola like, okay, well, we're not going to do coconut water anymore. That was a big trend, right? And they divest out. And it's just like, wow. But, it was great for the investors, but, we'll see, what happens going forward.
Yes. So how do you advise founders to think about goal setting when it comes to speed of growth? Like how do you advise them to benchmark, to create those speed of growth goals?
Because really, it's all about your fundraise and how you allocate your cash flow. Like people don't understand. You don't go bankrupt because all of a sudden. It's really just like, wow, you got a huge shipment, but you don't have the money to do it. And it's just like, that's a huge problem because like you deal with suppliers, right? Like they can't wait 90 days. They can't wait 60 days. They need to pay the moment you ship. And so it's like, where are you on your cash flow is so important to a company that people don't realize that. Like, I mean, you might wait for that one order from Whole Foods, but it's not going to change everything because you might not have the time to do it. And so I always tell people, raise more money than you need. I mean, like you'll get it overall because once you have that growth, you can raise even more money at a higher valuation that you'll outperform your goals. That's really the key. Because if someone tells you like, oh, I just need like 2 months worth of money, like, well, that's too tight of a window for me to like just write.
Right.
Sorry, like I get it.
Yeah, totally.
Like like 18 months. Like give me 18 to 24 months every time. And listen, I hope you offset it with net burn because you're making money. That's wonderful. And then you'll have more money to spend. It just depends. And sometimes it's a hiring issue as well. Like you might have all this money. I have tech companies where like they want to burn $1 million a month, but they can't people to do it. So like,
Oof.
that's totally fine, but then make sure you find the right people to get you there. Because it's in this game, I tell people it's like it's passing the hot potato. It's just like, because like I am a great pre-seed seed investor, but then I get you the Series A, and that's that next person's job. It's a totally different team. Like I wish I could be with you from start to finish, but sometimes I won't, right? Because that's okay. Because it takes a different type of team and advisors and mentors to help you get there. For you to be $1 billion business, it's going to be a whole new team besides your wife and the people you started out with initially. And that's what's exciting about the journey. And I get to see, like, then you were on Sharktank, and the next thing you know, you're like ringing the bell or getting bought, you know? And
exactly.
That's what's amazing.
Yes. Amen.
Well, wonderful. Well, William, thank you so much for the time. If anybody wants to reach out to you, where can they find you and find you most your bread and your.
Yeah, so super simple. If you live in the Midwest, you can walk in a Meijer grocery store. If you live anywhere else, you come to uprisingfood.com, and we'll take it from there. If you want to connect with me directly, best way is LinkedIn. Look for William Schumacher, and we'll
Wonderful.
connect.
Thank you so much, William.